Okay, so welcome. My name is Michelle. I'm a child life specialist.
And my name is Sue Kelly, and I am a behavior therapist. And thank you for coming today. So, who are we
So,
talking about when we're thinking about, dealing with shy children, and children who may actually be described um, are shy, slower to sort of warm up in new places, people and situations, taking longer to adapt to change. Kids that may just need a little bit more time to adapt to transitions or trying out new situations, meeting new people, maybe going back to school, or if they're more likely to experience anxiety as well, just across a variety of situations that they just may pop up. They're sort of the unknown, right? So that's sort of who we're going to be talking about today, is the kids that are struggling with these kinds of challenges.
so today we're going to be talking about identifying the stages of confident speech. As your children may not be speaking at all to some people, they may select who they want to talk to, maybe just a select few friends, or maybe a select few adults, or they may not be talking to anybody at all. So we're going to be discussing that and how to develop a plan. So increase your child's comfort level with when speaking in various settings and increase your child's comfort level when speaking with various people.
And just some common behaviors that you may see or you may not, but they're just some common behaviors, or that they may not speak to certain staff, parent helpers, or peers. They may speak to just a few select peers. You may notice that they speak to a parent who visits a classroom. They may also just communicate with their nonverbals. So like some of those head nods or eye rolls or kind of like that head tilt or like the shoulder raises. Some may not communicate at all, so you may get absolutely nothing from them. They may just speak to very select people, like they may have specific adults or specific peers or other children that they may speak to. And they may just appear very nervous or fidgety or just kind of like edgy or maybe even a little bit hyperactive.
So they may come across as defiant when expected to speak. So they ask, do you want a piece of pizza, for example, and the child doesn't respond. When they're asked to come up to address a question and they just shut down and refuse. Some teachers, adults, they see this as defiance because I heard you talk to your friend over there and now you're refusing. Some children actually don't eat or drink at school or daycare at all. They have a hard time with anything oral, so putting something in their mouth, depending on what it is too much of an anxiety-provoking situation. So they just don't eat or drink. And they have difficulty asking to use the bathroom. So these are children that don't like a lot of attention on them. Speaking up is difficult, and then some of them will actually have accidents, which to us doesn't make sense because you would think, what's the bigger worry here? Asking to go to the bathroom? But they just hold it until they can't hold it anymore, and then they have an accident, which we would think would draw more attention. But the anxiety is just so strong that it holds them back from things that we think are just logical, just to ask to go to the bathroom. They may appear uncomfortable being seen or heard speaking, and especially when they do talk and people give them a lot of attention, they just shut down. I mean, this picture of this child is very common, right? I'm not comfortable. Don't look at me. Don't give me any attention. Yes. So if you do if this is something that relates to you, then yes, it does happen at school, outside of the home, and usually at home, you'd never know, right? Because that's a lot of times parents don't know that there's actually an issue because at home they talk so much, but the closer that they get to school, sometimes you can start seeing the shutdown of not wanting to speak.
So there can be some contributing factors as well, and it could be that they just have a little bit more of an anxious or shy temperament. Um, and that can be genetic as well. If they do have anxiety, what kind of anxiety do they have as well? Because there are different types of anxiety. They may have separation anxiety, and separation anxiety is pretty typical up until about age 5. If it's starting to go beyond age 5 and they're now sort of 7, 8, 9, it's now becoming more of a disorder than it is part of that developmental age and stage. But social anxiety as well can also go along with shyness, or it can be also part of sort of that selective mutism where they're just so socially anxious as well that they just don't want to talk, and they're just so fearful of the rejection or the judgment that they may face from others. And they may have an expressive language disorder. So that's something else that may need to be sort of teased out and assessed, as well as any cognitive disabilities that may be underlying as well.
Hmm. I remember we had one parent that her child had a speech impediment, was seeing a speech pathologist, and because of the selective mutism, it's like, so which one are we going to deal with? Because the more that we correct the language as you're supposed to do, the more that the child shuts down. So are we trying to get them to speak, or are we trying to correct the pronunciation? So it's at that point, it was trying to figure out, okay, we're going to work on getting them to talk first, and then we'll go back to speech path
Then the correct.
to work on the rest. Yeah. So these are the stages of confident speaking. So you can take a look and see, this may be something that you have to ask the teacher. And again, they have a different sense as to what you're seeing. But number one is, the lowest is not being able to communicate or participate at all. 2 would be cooperate but limited communication. 3 communicates through visual and nonverbal means. And 4 is uses nonverbal sounds, so we'll make noises, cat noises, or say things like woohoo or things like that. Speaks within earshot, but not directly to the person. So I will talk to my friend, and you might overhear me, because some kids don't even want you to overhear them. Uses single words, uses connected speech, so actual sentences. And then 7 is using connected speech with select people. Then begins to generalize to a range of people, so not just those few selected. And then begins to range of settings, right? So sometimes they will talk outside to a teacher, but once they get into the classroom, the classroom is too overwhelming and they're not able to talk to the same teacher in that setting. So when they start doing that in different locations, that's when we know that we're working on the anxiety. And 10 would be ideal, that they communicate freely.
So anxiety, if we have that sort of playing its role in shyness, anxiety really is a normal emotion, and it's a physical response that occurs when we become really overwhelmed by fear. And we can't ever really get rid of anxiety. It's just something that is that normal alarm bell system that goes on in our body that lets us know that there's something that we really should be concerned about. But when it becomes out of control and it's sort of taking over, that's when it's starting to become more of a problem. So, if we're feeling like, we're starting to become out of control, and we're not able to deal with the tasks at hand that are sort of being presented to us, and the anxiety is stopping us from doing those things or participating in things, and we're now starting to sort of come into this pattern of behavior that's all about avoidance and avoiding things and avoiding people and situations. Now we have more of an anxiety disorder that's starting to develop, and it may be attaching itself to some of the other things that are going on, especially if you have like selective mutism. So they can be kind of going hand in hand with one another as well.
So this is the cycle of anxiety. It doesn't always look this pretty, but you may have that thought, if I talk, then I'll be embarrassed. I'll say something wrong. People will laugh at me. Then they may have those physical sensations. I'm feeling hot. I have butterflies in my belly. I feel like I'm going to cry. Then I have the feelings of feeling overwhelmed. And I have fear, and I'm worried about being embarrassed. I'm just uncomfortable. So then I have a behavior. So the behavior is I shut down, I refuse to speak, and the outcome is that I feel better. Unfortunately, with avoidance, it's a band-aid solution for a long-term problem. And children will learn, I'll shut down. Somebody will speak up for me. My sibling will order for me. My mom will talk for me. My grandmother, my grandfather, whoever, my caregiver, the teachers, whoever, somebody is going to speak up. Unfortunately, as they start getting older, that happens less and less, and they almost become invisible because they don't speak up, they don't talk. So it's really important to start working on this right away and kind of wrap around the child and work together with the school and all the caregivers involved to work on these steps, because it can be really hard for them to start talking when this is how they've learned to deal with their anxiety. And to them, the outcome is favorable. Right now, in this moment, my anxiety feels better, but it just gets worse and worse, unfortunately.
So, and then again, saying it like with this wheel of worry, it really is about that constant, you're moving around, and it is like this virtual sort of Ferris wheel where it's like I'm constantly picking up a new worry, and I'm going around and around and around with that thought and all the things that are attached to that thought. And then it's like, oh, and then what if this happens? And I pick up another set of worries, and I'm going around and I'm thinking about that. And then that festers, and then I'm picking up another one. And there's no place to sort of like offload, or get rid of those thoughts. They just continue to keep building and festering and getting bigger and bigger, until you finally either just shut down or break down. And this is where we may start to see those behavioral responses, because they just can't process them anymore. The emotions are too big. They can't manage the emotions that are behind them. And this is where we get that complete, can't function, and I'm just going to avoid. I can't go. I'm having physical symptoms now because my body is physically now reacting, to the emotional stress and distress that I'm putting it under because of the thoughts, right? So I'm having the upset stomach. I'm having, the nervous stomach, the diarrhea, the shakes, the shivers, the gritting of my teeth, the headache, pain. So my body's now physically breaking down as well. So it all becomes this really bad, vicious cycle. And like I said, there's just no opportunity to offload. But once I avoid, that's the winner, right? This is the deal with anxiety. And it's like this little carrot that gets hung that says just avoid that situation. And if you just stay away from that situation, everything's going to be wonderful and rosy, and you're going to feel so much better. And the thing is that it really fuels it, right? It's like this miracle cure for them that once they avoid it, they're like, see, I feel so much better. I don't have all of those physical feelings in my body anymore, and I'm not shaking and I'm not sweaty, and all is good. So the avoidance becomes very much sort of like self-reinforcing to them. So it really
Mhm.
becomes difficult and challenging to get them to break this cycle.
Right. So, as far as working with your child and kind of getting them to a different stage of comfort with their speaking, there are things that are going to help progress, but also can deter progress. So it's something to be aware of. And you just may have to be extra diligent or just be aware that there could be some barriers, and this is why. So your child probably does have a shy and anxious temperament. Whether they have a disorder on top of that, we can't tell you that, but the two usually go hand in hand. And then there's, the length of how long they've been at that stage of communication. So if they haven't spoken at school to any adults or just to one or two adults for a whole year, half a year, 2 years, to get to the next step will be much harder. It's doable, but it just makes it a little harder. And then the severity of the existing stage. So if they're not speaking at all and they haven't spoken at all at school for a year, it will be a little bit harder. You have to work a little harder to get them to the next step. Also, their age and developmental level. So some children developmentally are just emotionally and socially maybe behind. So we have to think about that as well. Are they functioning at their age level or a little bit younger? And, for some children, like the younger stages, they haven't been doing this for as long. As they start getting older, this kind of turns into their persona of who I am and how I react to things. So to change it will be harder, but possible. Just being aware how long they've been doing things this way, and they have to learn new coping strategies in a new way and break that cycle. And then maintaining that momentum. So, when we're doing these steps, we want to do the steps on, consistently. And when we get stuck on one step and then we stay there for a while, it's tough to get to the next step. So you're doing a lot of hard work, especially in the beginning, but you want to keep that momentum so the progression continues.
And just, like just some general strategies here are really to, think about just try and have sort of like a normal conversation, right? Don't try to expect like an immediate response from your child, and try and get down to their level. And getting down to their level doesn't necessarily mean that, I have to be like in their face. It can be side by side. It can just be sort of nearby. But it's just, trying to kind of, sort of come down a little bit, right? And kind of be near where they are versus being like on the other side of the room or being in a different room. Just generally being in their space, their general space, right? And try to sort of minimize actually that sort of direct on eye contact, because it really makes most people very uncomfortable. And certainly when you have, anxious children or shy children, that eye contact, it really kind of puts up almost a barrier to like, I feel really uncomfortable. I'm shutting down. I don't want to, have that kind of, it almost feels like, a bit of the Spanish Inquisition going on there. So we don't want to have that kind of direct questioning, at least not, when you're starting out, right? And decrease sort of the pressure to speak, especially depending on the stage where they're at. And phrase your questions to, just allow them to respond even in a way that they feel is most natural for them depending on where they're at. So if it starts out with being more of that nonverbal response to begin with, then that's where you start, right? You start where they're comfortable beginning, and then you try to build upon that, right? And minimize the attention, especially when they start to talk. A lot of caregivers have been known to kind of get a little bit, exuberant with their celebratory kind of like, wow, look at that. They talked. Did you hear that? Come on, we got to call grandma and grandpa. We got to tell everybody. And it's too much, right? It's just way too much. It's over the top. It's like telling everybody about, oh, look, they pooped in the potty. No, we don't need to share all the information and the glory. We just, hey, good job. And just leave it at that. Like, just normalize it, because we want it to be a normalized behavior. We don't want to make it exuberant and over the top and celebratory. Okay?
Yeah, exactly. And these are really good things to pass on to daycare, to family members, to the teachers as well. If you're signing them up for camp or for sports, still have the coach address them, say good morning, do whatever. Just don't expect that they're going to respond. But eventually they may respond, and it may just be a smile or a wave. But if we never give the opportunity, then they just become invincible, right? So it's just altering our expectations. Don't lower them. But these are the kinds of things that can help with giving direct instructions to people that will be around your child to get your child to speak more. You can also use creative ways to speak through a telephone, puppets talking. I don't know why it works, but some kids will talk through a puppet. I've seen it happen. I've done it with kids. And yeah, they'll talk through the puppet. Talk through a microphone, a telephone, be creative. And then provide opportunities for activities that do not require spoken language in the classroom. So can a child hand out paperwork? Can they point to, the color? This is a little bit easier with younger kids. As they start getting older, they can't point to the word, but with younger kids, they can point to what day it is or what the weather is, or they can whisper to the teacher instead of needing to say it out loud. And then eventually the child can work on saying it out loud. Using the buddy system is really important. So when you've got a child that is willing to talk to someone or would go to soccer if they had a friend, maybe not soccer because it's pretty loud, would go to art class because their friend is going or their sibling is going, that is the bridge, right? So that child they're willing to talk to, they will talk to in a different environment. And eventually they'll start talking. And that's when you move in the other friend. So hopefully the other friend will be able to overhear. And once they get comfortable, you keep switching the people around so the child becomes more and more comfortable. So that bridging is really important with the buddy system. And make sure the child is included in teams and group activities. Again, advocate for your child. I've had a lot of parents that will can the younger sibling come or whatever? And this is why, because they will speak when their friend is there, or they're more likely to participate because they're comfortable. And this has happened in daycare as well. I remember one child was not eating, and the sister was very different. She was very outgoing, and she was the younger one. And the younger one came into the older child's classroom to have lunch, and they sat off to the side in one of the play areas at their own table. There was a little bit of a visual block, and then eventually she started moving towards the table. And the mom, by the end of everything, the child was like, when there was a tour, she was showing people around, so it's unbelievable to see children do well, but we just have to do it in small steps, but keep that momentum going and make sure everybody is wrapping around that child. That daycare or staff was wonderful and on board with mom and really helped this child out. Because, when you're the caregiver, you're not there. You're not at school. So we really do have to rely on the people around the kids.
So part of this too is, teaching your kids how to calm themselves down and, how to sort of promote a sense of relaxation. And again, when we're thinking about anxiety and anxiety as a component of this, they're constantly on alert all the time, right? So these kids never really sort of come down to that state of, feeling calm and feeling relaxed. So if they're always in that sort of, tense, alert stage, and they're always sitting, say, at a elevated, level of 3 or 4, it doesn't take them much, first of all, to, get elevated to an 8 or a 10. But when they come back down, they never come right back down. So we need to be able to start to teach them, how do we do that? And what does that feel like for them to even begin to explore that sense of calm, right? And these are just some ideas. You really need to explore this with your kids because it's so individual to their own personal preferences. But breath work is a huge piece because breath work has to have a physiological effect on some of those physical things that I was talking about that are actually happening to their body when they're getting anxious. So by using breath work, you actually lower that cortisol level in the body, and the heart rate has to lower, and therefore the anxious, sort of feelings that they're having in their body do begin to slow down. And by doing that, their thoughts begin to stop racing, and they're able to sort of think a little bit more rationally than what they might have been at the beginning of the situation. So breath work is definitely something to try and practice, and there are so many different breathing techniques that are out there. There's belly breathing where you can, put a teddy bear on their tummy like a stuffy and have them lay down and watch the stuffy sort of rise and fall. There's, like smell the roses, blow out the birthday candles. There's so many different kinds. But just even generally, like have a good laugh, like find ways to bring some laughter into the home. Like if they're always feeling tense and tight and, sort of on alert all the time, inject some laughter, bring a joke of the day or a funny word, or find ways to bring laughter into the house. Music, you can have a little bit of a dance moment while you're making dinner, put on a minute of dance music and everybody kind of dance while you're making dinner. Texture is really important too. So different pieces of fabric or, um, you know, macaroni
Rice in
or
a bowl.
little piece,
Rice in a
a
bowl is
bracelet.
good.
Yeah, absolutely. Lots of different pieces. Play around with texture. That really helps. Kids like to have things to touch, or like pillows with different textures on the fabric. They can touch them and stroke them and, kind of scrape their nails on them. Mental imagery, guided imagery really works to kids' strength, right? Because they have creative minds. They do better with this kind of thing than the actual mindfulness because somebody is actually sort of giving them a picture that they can develop in their mind. So they do really well with sort of the guided imagery. And again, YouTube is fantastic. There's a wealth of resources out there to just explore, and I'm sure your children would find something that they would find that would suit them. Thought distraction is anything about doing anything to just sort of distract your thinking, because you can not do two things at the same time. So you can't be thinking about what's, making you feel anxious and worried or fearful and be trying to do something that's going to distract you at the same time. So counting rhymes, the one bun, two shoe, three tree kind of thing, counting backwards, five things that I smell, five things that I see. Um, you can come up with all kinds of different, I spy with my little eye, um, all kinds of different distraction techniques. Sound machines, progressive muscle relaxation. Again, that's that muscle memory situation, right? Because again, they're so on alert that their muscles again have always, they've sort of kind of stayed in that tense state. So you want to try and practice with them to do that tense and release so that they get that feeling of, like, yes, this is what it feels like to be able to allow my body to sort of release that tension and release that tightness. And then I talked a little bit already about the breathing, and we can use balloons and bubbles and windmills and whatever may work. So again, these are just some ideas, and you want to explore this with your kids, as I said, to find what resonates with them. What kinds of things do you think they might come up with that says, yeah, I'd really like to try this? Because that's what's meaningful. If it's meaningful to them, then they're more apt to use it, right?
So Sue talked a lot about avoidance and how it's self-reinforcing. It prevents the child from learning that nothing bad will happen. So these positive coping strategies are things that you want to use on a regular basis, not just in the moment in a crisis, right? So you're using them on a regular basis. And instead of avoiding, I have to learn to tolerate a little bit of my distress. And emotion comes up and it comes down. And we don't want to rescue them when they're at the top. So what we want to do is help them with those strategies to help turn the volume down a little bit, and the emotion will come back down. But a lot of children, that's why they avoid, is I don't know what to do with this, so I need to shut down and I need to get rid of this uncomfortable feeling. So instead, let's give them some positive ways to deal with that. And that was a lot of great examples that we had on the other slide. The problem with avoidance too is that it interferes with normal functioning, that I can't go to the parties. I can't go and order my own food at a restaurant. These things get in the way. I can't talk to somebody that I'm really interested in talking to in swimming class. So it does really affect them in many different ways. When you allow your child to avoid and we step in and fix, or we step in and answer for them, or we have that friend or the sibling that is ordering for them or talking for them, the message is you can't do this. Just stay home. You don't worry about it. And it also stay home because whatever you're worried about, it's going to happen. And we can't control everything, but is that thing going to happen? Are people going to laugh at them? Are they going to be judged? Is it going to be horrible because no one's going to talk to them, or they're going to be avoided? We don't know until we go. And sometimes bad things happen, but not all the time do bad things happen. And was it a 10 out of 10 bad, or was it more like a 6? You thought it was a 10, it was more like a 6. So actually not so bad. And the next time we go, it'll be a little bit easier. And avoidance works short term. So it's a Band-Aid solution for a long-term problem. So we really want to break that cycle of fixing and allowing them to avoid.
You may as well go on and do the exposure part. It's part of
that. Yeah. So what we're doing as part of that is then giving them the opportunity to practice and be in those situations that make them feel uncomfortable. So we want to use gentle encouragement and gradual exposure. I mean, we're not dropping them into the deep end, but how can we get them to interact more? So pointing to the donut that they want, smiling at the person behind the counter, waiting in line, passing the money over, taking the product from there, saying thank you. This may be a bunch of times going for a donut or for a drink, so it may cost you a little bit of money, but there's other ways to do this. It doesn't just have to be with food, but what are those ways that we can get them to interact? Going to the park. What is the concern? The concern might be a little bit hard for the child to talk about, so we can try to anticipate what it is. The judgment, I'm going to be laughed at. They're going to think I'm stupid. They won't play with me. I'm a loser. A lot of anxious thoughts can be going there. what is your goal that the child feels more comfortable, can have a conversation, or can at least say hello. So what are the steps to get there? And then we're doing that hierarchy. So what would be the easiest thing for them to do, and what would be the hardest thing for them to do? So the easiest thing for them to do is to stand next to a child instead of standing back, standing next to the child at the slide, and go up and be closer to the kids. Maybe the hardest thing would be to have a conversation and say something to the child. So you want to make that ladder of the hierarchy, and then you create your steps, and that ladder of exposure is your steps. So what are the small steps to get there? So it may mean going to the park every day, right? And doing each step every day. You might have to do one step more than once, but it's staying consistent and acknowledging the effort.
This is just an example of an exposure ladder.
Yeah.
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 You want to go? You may as well go ahead. You were explaining, so go ahead.
Okay. Okay. So this is for starting school, right? So let's say we've got a kindergarten, or we're going to a new school. Maybe we're going from kindergarten to grade 1, so it's going to be quite a change for them. So get outside and play outside of the school, because it's an anxiety-provoking place, especially now since kids have not been in school. We need to get to school. We need to connect with the school. We need to find out what classroom teacher they're going to have. Can their friend be in the class with them? So those are the kind of steps you should be doing now. And then go over there and play. Have positive memories at school. Then get your friends from school, which will be the bridge to get them talking at school, to meet you there. Have the play dates. Connect with children from your classroom outside of school. That's really important, because that is where you're going to make those connections. And then when they go to school, they're more likely to speak to those children in school. And then you're going to visit the classroom. Maybe you're going to visit the classroom without the teacher there. Then you're going to visit the classroom with the teacher in the room. And you might need some more steps in here. Maybe the teacher will address the child. Maybe the parent and child will speak. Maybe they're going to be bringing a sibling along. Like, what are those steps? You can take some pictures of the classroom. Lots of different steps you can add in here, but it's trying to stay connected. And this is a lot of planning. And then when they get there, maybe we have a special handshake or a song while we're walking to school, because walking to school is actually easier for them because they're getting some energy out. And then we can sing a special song or say something, and then they can start their day. So this is, again, just a short one, but it's breaking things down and then being consistent and making sure that the school is on board as well. So this is a lot of planning as well, and everybody kind of working together. Okay, I'll let you talk now.
That's okay. That was a lot. Michelle did allude to this already, but I mean, really, whether it be school or daycare, or even if it's like some kind of a after school event, or if they're in some kind of a sporting class or whatever, the communication is really critical, right? Because you really need to be able to include them in what you're working on, and like Michelle said, and I thought it was so key, that they continue with that, hi, how are you? Even if they don't respond, because there may be that one day that they do start to respond, because you don't want them to become invisible. You want them to be part of things. So that quiet child usually also is not seen as a problem and can easily be sort of forgotten about and just kind of like, fall into the wayside, because, let's face it, right? Like the noisier kids or behavior problem kids tend to get much more attention, and everybody thinks, oh, those kids over there, they're doing fine. They're, they don't need our attention, when actually they really do need, just as much support, but just in a very, very different way. So accommodations need to be made for those, oral-based evaluations maybe, alternatives to speeches and presentations may need to be found. Like we need to get creative and put on those creative, hats to think outside of the box, to find other ways to help these kids to feel like they can be part of the mainstream. Meetings to maybe address like some of the social planning, have a contact card ready with some information on it as well. And, ask the teacher who might be a good fit too for a playmate. Think about the seating arrangements. Like, is there somebody that, maybe over the summer that your child maybe had a reasonable connection with, that maybe it might transfer really well to the classroom, that they could sit close to or nearby, that there might be able to be some support there in terms of communication. So, or they could be hall buddies, or, play a little bit outside on the playground. So there could be some, branches or connections to be able to create friendships and communication with other children that way as well. So just, you want to think outside of the box, but we have to communicate. We have to include, the other players that are involved in our children's care, so that they're aware, first of all, what the challenges are, what the struggles are that your children are having, and let's get creative, right? Let's try and put our hats and heads together to try and figure out how can we help these children to be successful and think outside of the box. Okay.
Okay. Just some more tips. Take the pressure off. Do not make speaking demands that the child will fail to meet. So if you want this pizza, you have to ask for it. The child will go hungry. Pressure to speak scenarios camouflages incentives, like the example I just gave. And when the child refuses to speak under pressure, their avoidance behavior is reinforced. So instead, create opportunities that don't involve pressure. And Sue talked about a lot of nonverbals. I can give a head nod, I can point, thumbs up, thumbs down, different ways to communicate. And so we're not pushing them to do this because they will resist. And then this is self-reinforcing avoidance. And these are just some references for you. This book was created, this workshop was created by Dr. Angela McHome, and this is the book that she wrote. So we have revised it through the years, but she's an amazing woman and knows a lot about these shy and quiet children. Okay.
And just some more resources for you as well that and as Haruka just typed in, all of these resources will be made available to you on the page. So we have a few minutes. If anybody has any questions, we're happy to answer them. Certainly hope this was helpful. And if we don't have any questions, you're welcome to close off, and we wish everybody a very happy Canada Day coming up.
Looks like there's some typing. Okay, go ahead, and you'd have to
Oh, good. We have it.
Yeah. Yeah, so if your child has other anxieties, or other workshops would be helpful. So this was specific to children that don't speak or speak minimally. So we have other workshops that will address those types of anxieties. It is common, but you can use the same idea as the exposure. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? With thunderstorms, it's a little bit harder because they only happen in a short period of time, but what's the thought behind it? What's the worst thing that's going to happen? Do you need a safety plan? Will a tree fall? Possibly not. But some children worry about tornadoes and hurricanes and things that, haven't happened. So you can do a little bit of research as far as that goes. But that is a different kind of workshop when we address those things.
Yeah, Haruka has a link there to some of the other stuff on Your Space Hamilton that we have done.
Mhm.
Haruka, can you also put the link in for the Children's Hospital, the McMaster Children's Hospital link to our other workshops as well?
Courses. Yeah. Yeah, we have a few anxiety ones coming up.
So there are some that are already pre-recorded on Your Space, and there will be other workshops we will be doing over the summer, and we will probably be hosting some courses from September to December, probably later this month, for you
Yes.
to take a look at.
Yeah, but it's the same idea with the steps, the goals, the exposure, the avoidance. You're just looking at it in a different way. Okay?
Yeah, we
You're
have lots of
welcome.
stuff to explore the anxiety topic.
Mhm.
All right. Thank you so much to Michelle.
Wonderful.
Um,
Okay.
Thank you. And I
Thank
will
you.
share the
Thank you,
resource page
Ruka.
out to everyone through email. So you'll receive a very similar email as it was for the link for today's session, which will include the recording as well. So if you find it helpful to watch it again. As well, the Your Space YouTube channel also has all of our past sessions that are more so specific to anxiety that Sue and Michelle have done in the past as well. So feel free to take a look at those at a time that works for you. Thank you so much, Sue and Michelle, and have a great evening, everyone.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Bye,
So
everybody.
glad it was helpful.